I'm Barbara Gregorich, and in my previous video, in which I read Chapter 3 of Exit Velocity, I promised to make an inside fiction video about some of the things I, as a writer, tried to do in Chapter 3, and also some of the things that readers will understand while reading this first chapter from Jake's point of view. In this video, I want to talk briefly about three of the many things going on in Chapter 3. First, how I tried to use writing style to create character and character differentiation in Exit Velocity. Second, subtext, what it is and why it's important. Third, covering the same events twice in the same book. Let's look at writing style first. I knew from the beginning that when I started to write the chapters from Jake Terranova's point of view, that I wanted to write differently. That's because, unlike Rowan, Jake is not from a working class background. He's from the middle class, and I wanted his thought process and his voice to reflect that. I immediately thought that, in contrast to Rowan's voice, Jake's would express itself in longer sentences, perhaps more phrases and clauses and more complexity. Once I decided that, then it became easy for me to slip into that style when I was writing the Jake chapters. Let's take a look at the first sentence of Chapter 3. The difference between Boston and Chicago is vast. The former old, with narrow streets cobbled together from cow paths, but oh so rich in history and culture. The latter brash, bold, with wide streets, but none of the culture of New England. That sentence is 45 words long. Compare it to the first sentence from Rowan's point of view. I need a job. 4 words long. Now, it wasn't my intention to imply that Jake is 10 times wordier than Rowan, or 10 times smarter, or 10 times anything. What I was trying to show is that Jake thinks differently. And part of the reason he thinks differently is because of his class background and the many advantages he has had, particularly educational advantages. As a member of the middle class, Jake has not only more education than Rowan, but also more money and more leisure time. He, unlike Rowan, has more time to look at a subject from many different points of view. He, unlike Rowan, is not desperate for a job. Let's look at another of Jake's sentences on the first page of his chapter. Today, I'm not on assignment for Highland Studios. I'm on my own, gathering material for my podcasts, which have made the Boston to Chicago transition well. My downloads swelling from 1,000 a month to 2,000 a month, moving Jake's takes closer and closer to the top 10%. That is a 46-word sentence. And here is one more, this one a mere 36 words. The gun control rally, the third I've attended since I've been here, presents more of the same old, same old. Two sides facing each other, one saying guns are the problem, the other denying there even is a problem. Now, Rowan is quite capable of complex thinking, and so there are many 20-some word sentences in her chapters and even 30-some word sentences. But on the whole, her point of view chapters are in a voice that uses shorter, more direct sentences. So, while average sentence length is one way to create distinctions between a middle-class person such as Jake and a working-class person such as Rowan, there's another aspect of thinking that enters into the differences between them. And that is that a middle-class person, especially one as highly educated as Jake, because of being exposed to so much of world culture and because of having a lot of options open to him, is going to make a lot of mental qualifications of things. You can feel this in almost every one of Jake's sentences. Listen to this one from above. Today, I'm not on assignment for Highland Studio. Okay, sorry, I lost my place. Today, I'm not on assignment for Highland Studios. I'm on my own, gathering material for my podcasts, which have made the Boston to Chicago transitions well. My downloads swelling from 1,000 a month to 2,000 a month, moving Jake's takes closer and closer to the top 10%. Okay, as I said, one of the reasons this is a long sentence is because Jake is aware of his options. When he says that, quote, today I'm not on assignment for Highland Studios, unquote, he's also saying that some days he is on assignment for them. When he talks about his podcasts, he mentions his Boston to Chicago transition and that his number of listeners is increasing. He is definitely aware that Jake's Takes is moving closer and closer to the top 10% of podcasts. Although he does not state it, this is obviously a goal he has, something he wants to achieve. It's clear to the reader that Jake has many possibilities in his life. To qualify something is to make it less absolute, to add reservations. Jake no sooner tells us about Boston's streets cobbled together from cow paths than he qualifies that by assuring us Boston is rich in culture and history, despite the cow path streets. Rowan would have probably said something like this: Boston and Chicago, no comparison. Middle-class people are more apt to qualify what they say. Working-class people are more apt to be blunt, direct, to the point. In summary, then, I tried to create discernible differences between the thought processes of Rowan and Jake and make them noticeable in the writing so that the reader would feel the difference. Second, in looking inside chapter 3, I want to talk about subtext. In fiction, text is visible. It's the words you read. It's what the writer is saying. Text is on the page. Subtext is, in a way, invisible text. The words of subtext are not on the page. Instead, subtext is what's hidden, what is implied. Subtext adds depth to a story. Readers, either consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously, pick up on subtext. This enriches the story for them. So, what subtext is present in chapter 3? One of the subtexts is evident in the first paragraph, where Jake is talking about the differences between Boston and Chicago. And the subtext there is that Jake doesn't yet feel at home in Chicago. Throughout the entire chapter, in fact, you can sense that Jake and Chicago are a bit at odds. He moved here and he should feel at home here, but he doesn't, at least not yet. You, the reader, are never told this. You pick it up from what is implied but not said. Also, we learn through the text, that is what's on the page, that Jake is proud of his ability to make inferences, to look at something and draw conclusions about it. But we learn through the subtext that Jake assumes all his inferences are correct, as in his inference that Rowan has trained the parrot to listen to her commands and attack Zeb Snotty. Finally, we learn through the subtext that Jake is the kind of person who pursues a story with dedication and determination. We infer this by the way he follows Rowan, and even though she punched him and told him to stay away, the way he walks up the stairs to her porch and knocks on her door. Subtext tells the reader a lot about characters, and I think it makes fiction more interactive and therefore more enjoyable. Finally, I want to talk about the fact that in chapter 3, I repeat some of the events from chapter 1, only from a different point of view, Jake's instead of Rowan's. To do this is not uncommon in fiction, but a writer does have to be careful how much to repeat and for what purpose. A small bit of repetition goes a long way. However, not only did I think I was safe in doing this one bit of repetition, but I thought it was absolutely necessary for me to repeat in order to set up the story. Once chapter 3 is done, the reader sees that Jake and Rowan are going to be in conflict when they meet. Not so much because Jake grabbed Rowan's shoulder and she punched him, but because they experienced the Zeb Snotty and Parrot incident in very different ways. Further, the reader knows that Jake is going to be pursuing a story based on an erroneous assumption. And the reader knows that Rowan has no reason to trust Jake, not only because he grabbed her from behind, but also because she senses that he wants something he's not being honest about. In order to establish all of the above, I felt I needed to show readers the same events from two different points of view. Chapter 3 is the only chapter in the book which repeats events. Of course, chapter 3 leads directly to chapter 4, and it's there that this clash of personalities takes place. Up until now, exit velocity has been very serious. But chapter 4 is, I think, a very funny chapter, despite the serious nature of the book. Comic relief is important in literature. And that's it for now. In my next video, I will introduce the third and final point of view in exit velocity, that of Deeply, the parrot from another planet. Thank you.